Speaking voices strong and loud. Dreams like fire can't be doused. You built the world, but we hold the torch. A brighter future's what we're working toward.
Howdy Daydreamers, and welcome to Dakota Daydreams. I'm Dakota, and this is the Bedside Garden, episode 23. And this is most certainly not first thing the next morning. I definitely forgot about the poor plants, but I've been a little bit distracted by current events and just trying to keep track of them, honestly, because it's been a lot recently. And I kind of honestly broke focus on gardening for a minute. And that's okay, because we're going to clean it up and get it fixed. And while the lettuce definitely needs a trim, and probably the tomato too, I'm noticing that the sponges seem to have a little bit of something going on around the edges. So I think I'm going to adjust that really quick first. And I'm not sure I'm going to get this kind of sponge again, just because it's foaming a lot, and it kind of seems like it's because this sponge is breaking down faster than the plants really grow. And I'm not positive it's user error, but I'm not really thinking that it is because of the way they're changing colors as well. And it's not really consistent with what I would expect it to be darker when it's wet, not lighter, but the part that's underwater is lighter. And that kind of has me concerned, but I'm not really sure, because this is my first hydroponic garden. What I am sure of is that this is definitely the sponge breaking down, because after the foaming stops, it's pretty visibly pitted out in the areas where it had like the most of the texture changing, if that makes sense. Now, let me trim up this poor lettuce, because it is cramped. Like it started to grow so dense in one spot that it's kind of too much on itself. And I feel like that's not just because it's in hydroponics. Like I feel like that's just because of this individual lettuce or something. Because it could honestly be that this was one of the cups I put two of the seeds in, maybe, and it might even be two separate seeds that have grown together from how dense it is. But there were still a couple really large, good-looking leaves that I did snack on while I was working, and the flavor's alright. It's not as butter crunchy as it was earlier on when it was like baby greens, and it has more of like a soft spinach flavor, if that makes sense, as like a more mature leaf. And now I have the lettuce trimmed down to this cute little spike. And I can show y'all a little bit better what I mean by the sponges changing color, because they're really light, like down where the roots are underwater. And that might be why I keep having plants that seem like they're drying out. Because if the sponge isn't holding the water well enough against the inside of the roots, then they might be pulling air into it instead. I don't know. It's a little bit complicated with sponge science. And I trimmed off the leaves that had been touching the toothpick tomato cage on the Cherokee Purple, and it's now standing mostly upright by itself without needing the support. But I am going to leave the toothpicks there just in case it needs a little bit more support for a couple more days. And now it's time for the section that's usually catalog of the week, but this week I haven't really had a catalog that I vibed with like I have been most spring. And I have a couple of ideas that I would like to share instead in this part. See, for years and years, I have had the idea in my head, the design in my dreams of a new style of barnyard that combines gardening and the animal husbandry at the same time. Let me sketch it out. It starts with the barn in the middle of two enclosed pens. So, for example, if the barn is a chicken coop, both pens would be like a enclosed aviary with like the fencing along the top of a 8-foot high fence, just for example. And this way you can use one side for a year and then rotate them to the other side for the other year. And then in the year they're not in it, have the open field as garden area. And then when they're turned over to it again, they have aged up plants to snack on. Makes sense. You could even line both sides around the bottom with raised beds. A, to add more enforcement to the fencing, and B, to contain some plants that while animals may enjoy them and have a lot of herbal use for them, may be considered invasive, like mint. So far, I've concluded that the design would have to be symmetrical, with the bedding area towards either side that would likely be used as the back, if that makes sense. Um, to keep it out of way of the doors so that if something wanted to like lay down in the middle of the day while you were cleaning, because that's how animals tend to be, it could do that without being in the walkway. And then both sides of the barn would need a separate way to let the animals out, which in the off season would be used as, again, another back of the wall type area. And then both sides of the pen would need their own human entrance in the field part. This way, um, you could use the side you're using as a garden in the off season for the animals, or get in to figure out what's going on with the animals fairly quickly. And that's the general plan so far, but here's where it starts to get a little complicated. Whether you're raising animals or plants, the process typically requires quite a bit of water. So, in my mind, if one is already putting a lot of work into making a very stable, safe enclosure that has a very customized living barn, why not also build in the water source and have some sort of pond that is adjusted to a depth that is safe for the species that is in the enclosure, but has enough plant life put in around it to kind of help it retain water via their roots. And a lot of times I also pair this design with a smaller set that operates by the same mechanics so that the additional two fields could be used for, in good times, pulling two to the side for selective breeding, or in other times, putting some in for quarantine. That might be a good time, it might be a rough time. It depends on why they need the quarantine. Whether they're brand new and you're just checking their health, or if you've had them for a bit and they're acting real sick, so you want to separate them before it spreads. And having the smaller fields that are set up by the same plants and herbs and everything that's good for that species of animal, but a little more dense, closer together, and honestly a little bit overgrown. It's a really copacetic healing environment for most animals because they're able to snack on the herb that they can smell would help them the most as much as they want. and it also gives them a spot to be a little bit closer to everything, if that makes sense. They don't have to go as far to get what they need. And while this design hasn't made it out of the sketchbook and into real life yet, I do like to draw it out and think about it sometimes because it gives me a chance to think about features like, well, the fencing between the regular pens and the quarantine pens should probably be more dense regularly, but also have panels that can slide out in some way to just the uh, chain link or bird wire, some such, so that they can see each other and start to interact on at least one of the sides, while the other side is set up for more of a definite deep sick quarantine. Because generally, I try to keep in mind one side for like the sick times that needs to be close enough that, like, it's got the same herbs, same ecosystem, and they can still hear their friends, so they're less stressed on recovery, but there's protection for the healthy ones. While the other side would be primarily set up with the mindset of isolation for cause of maternity reasons, because sometimes when an animal's more heavily pregnant, it needs to be separated because the other ones aren't letting it get enough food or keep rushing it to move around faster with the group or some such. Or if a bird has like a really good hatch, it needs a little more space that's just her and her babies for a minute to like keep track of all of them. And for that reason, that specific pen would have a significantly shallower water feature, if not just pure troughs, just for the safety of like the littler critters. But for other critters, like ducks, for example, some form of wading pool or splash puddle is pretty necessary for very happy ducklings that grow quickly and healthy, you know? Because they're compelled to swim, and the mama duck is compelled to teach them to swim, and they get very stressed if they're trying to raise their own babies and they can't do that. So, for some species, they would need a pretty regular, maybe slightly shallower, but almost regular water feature as well. But ultimately, to me, the most important part of this plan is that it's bioactive from the very start. And that's why I started planning it, honestly, almost as soon as I was sure I wanted to have any type of farmyard animal, because I want to have lists of herbs. Like for chickens, I know that marigolds and calendula and mint and thyme sometimes, and especially oregano and sometimes chili pepper flakes, like cayenne pepper, can be really good for them and part of their natural foraging. So those are things I'd want to work into their pen for at least a year before there were ever birds setting foot in it. That way everything has time to root and establish really, really well, and probably even drop some seeds on its own at least once before the birds are like picking it apart or the goats are chewing on it or whatever. Because while it is there for them to eat on, I'd want to give some of it time to establish as well so that they're not able to fully eat it away in just a year. And then when they're rotated, it has a year to recover. That way, they are able to find a lot of their own food in a more natural way, and they become more reliant on feed in theory for like vitamin replacement for things that just aren't able to be in your area, if that makes sense. And their primary diet could be grown in the pens. And this is definitely an idea that I do plan to test at some point. And that's why you'll probably hear me talking a lot about needing land someday. Because to fully develop this idea, I would need to see if it's adaptable to at least chicken and turkey type birds, duck and goose type birds, goat and sheep type animals, and then I would really like to scale a version up for cows as well. Because I honestly, like, I mirrored this design off of descriptions I had from old farms and dreams and theories that kind of just came together from observation of different things that seem to work for a lot of different situations. And I really want to test it someday. Now let's see what's going on in the garden today. So I can't tell if the marigold's done yet, because while yes, it does look quite droopy since the last time I trimmed it, it does still have a couple more blooms left on it. So I think I'm just gonna let it do its thing, and then once it lays down, maybe stir the dirt up a little bit and like till it since there's no worms by hand. And maybe start some mint seeds in this pot, because the time that was in here does seem to have choked itself out for the most part. And I mean, there's a couple that are doing okay, but for the most part, it wrapped around itself. And that's my bad for kind of not checking on it for a little bit. So if you were growing thyme, do remember to keep an eye on it. And then I also need to water these again because the marigold pot and the pot with the mango melon are both really dry. The onions, on the other hand, are still very, very moist, and I'm really glad that the pot has built-in drainage because I feel like otherwise I definitely would have overwatered them last time. But since adding a little bit more plant food to the soil, the mango melon seems to have kind of gotten the idea that I want it to grow here, and I'll bring it nutrition. And it started growing really little or melon leaves. So I'm really interested to see if this one's going to miniaturize, possibly, because it's doing the whole plant thing, but it's doing it really small. So I'm definitely going to keep an eye on that and see how it goes. And now it's time for the Flowers Everlasting Spotlight, where I challenge you to take a picture of a temporary flower and then tell us its story. Why that flower? And then tag it with hashtag Flowers Everlasting 2025 so that we can see it, talk about it, and capture the temporary beauty of the flower. And the honorable mention spotlight, where I mention flowers that I've seen while going through the YouTube gardens and hearing about others' gardens for a bit. And this week's honorable mention is Mr. Pete from Pete's Cornish Garden, who's got his first harvest of sweet peas as some lovely cut flowers and shared them in a post so that we can enjoy them in flower form forever. Because posts never wilt, or pictures don't wilt. And thank you for dreaming with me. Please don't forget to leave a comment down below so I can say hello. And you can find links in the description for channels mentioned, challenges that I'm participating in, and even the Garden Challenge Rulebook, which has all of the challenges that I've heard about and had time to make a little short for. And until next time, take care of yourself and keep your head in the clouds.
Different hearts, but the same cries. Together we can see new